Detroit Lions fans, Detroit Gen 313 back with another one. Will here, ready to talk some Detroit Lions football. Before I do, please hit that subscribe button. Helps the channel out tremendously, and it's free. Not going to cost you anything, but it can help us put out this good content to you guys. Today, potentially some good news about Brian Branch. As I was doing some digging on this safety situation per the request of a couple of our subscribers. I came upon some information that I'll get into shortly that it made me happy. It made me real happy. But everybody knows that we have a little bit of a situation here with the Detroit Lions in the safety room. Don't know what's going on with Kirby Joseph. Things are real cryptic. Is it degenerative knee? Is there some type of injury that they won't talk about? Don't know exactly what the situation or what the outlook looks like. Everyone's guessing. Is there Will it ever heal? Is there ever a light at the end of the tunnel? Will he not be back next season? Nobody knows. I believe that he will be back. I believe that we're still going to squeeze a couple more seasons out of Kirby Joseph. I just don't know what it looks like after that. And I don't know if it'll be one of those situations where, for the lifetime of the Detroit Lions and Kirby Joseph, will it be 4 or 5 games, maybe have to take a game off, or will it be ever just Kirby going out and playing football? So that said, we're going to get into the safety situation. Obviously, we know Brian Branch ruptured Achilles. Potentially, he's going to miss some time. He's going to miss some time. So this safety room, what does it look like? What are we going to do? Do we need to go out and sign some big time marquee free agents? Do the Detroit Lions need to panic? Are we in shambles? A lot of people are saying that. I'm seeing it bounce around Twitter. We got to draft a safety in the first round. We got to draft, trade up and go get Caleb. We got to sell the farm and go get one of these guys in free agency, Cameron Curl, or one of these big time free agents, maybe spend some money or maybe make a crazy trade. Hey, listen, I gotta, as fun as all those topics sound, I think I got something more realistic today. I think, per the history of our GM Brad Holmes, we can probably say it's not going to be splashy or flashy, but I do think the Detroit Lions are in a decent situation. So let's start this conversation here. Here's what we have essentially in-house, even though I know two of these guys are free agents. We have, starting from the right, Dan Jackson, coming off of an injury, but should be ready for camp. He was a rookie out of Georgia, late round draft pick who was, man, just underrated, blue chipper, chip on his shoulder, a kid who's always had to prove it, 4'4", big physical downhill safety that likes to bring it. I think Dan Jackson is somebody who's being overlooked a little bit. I think that he may be a guy, I wouldn't be surprised, who took big time advantage of the opportunity to get some key snaps, and maybe he's a guy who could put a band-aid on this thing until Brian Branch got back and Kirby Joseph got settled in. I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of Dan Jackson going through preseason. I know he had a knee injury, but he's going to be ready or should be ready by the time camp rolls around. So Dan Jackson, looking forward to you, man. You've been an underdog your whole career. Respect your story, man. Walk on at Georgia to a captain. Kind of reminds me of Jack Campbell and the Mutt mentality. People are overlooking you, but you don't care. You just get out there and get to your business. Dan Jackson, guys, keep an eye out for Dan Jackson. I as I watched this film, I didn't see a guy that I thought was going to be a superstar in the league, but I did see a guy that I thought could serve some meaningful time. I did see a guy who could be one of those journeyman special teamers, spot duty starter. I see that out of Dan Jackson. So, hey, man, take advantage of your opportunity here with Detroit, man. You could get a shot this year with us having guys band up. Other two staples from this season. You got Avonte Maddox, Detroit kid, Detroit King Crusader, stand up. I wouldn't be surprised to see him come back home for another 1-year deal with Detroit, just trying to ride out the last few seasons of his career in Detroit in his hometown, and it'll be cheap. We're looking at 1.5 to 2 million to get Avante back in the building. Savvy veteran, a guy who's got Super Bowl experience. Would love to have him back. And the other guy to the left there is Rock Yassin. Rock Yassine's a guy who we know that he can play corner, and we know that he can play press man, right? But he's versatile. We dabbled with him playing a little bit of safety last year. He was showing some promise. Hey, that could be another direction this thing goes. And and leading into that, I need people to understand that Brad Holmes has given us the sauce. He's told us in Detroit, we're not just looking for people to be locked into certain positions like, hey, this guy is a free safety. Hey, this guy is a strong safety. Hey, this guy is a corner. He's looking for versatile defensive backs. They like those tough, gritty guys who can get physical and be football players. That's exactly what Rock Yassin is. That's exactly what Avante Maddox is. You can throw Avante Maddox into the nickel position. You could also throw him back there at safety. Rock Yassin is somebody who's shown that he has the potential to be able to play a little bit of safety. Those are the type of guys that the Detroit Lions are looking for. So I think that's what we need to keep an eye out for. Rock Yassin, if you're talking about what's his contract value out in the market value, what's that looking like? Another one, cheap. We're looking at 1.3 to 1.6 million dollars. Dirt cheap to get him back in the building. So you're telling me we could be going into camp with a banged up Kirby Joseph, but Avante Maddox, Rock Yassin, and then Dan Jackson as safeties going into camp. All right, is that what I want to see going into a playoff game? No, it's not what I want to see going into a playoff game. But if you're telling me that's how we have to start the season, hey, I'm not going to be in panic, especially depending on what we do up front in free agency in the draft. So if you're telling me I got a phenomenal pass rush that I just went and bolstered and I got to put a Band-Aid on it until Brian Branch gets back, and then maybe I'm dabbling with some of the other things that I got on my mind, I think this thing could be just fine. So I'm not panicking about this safety position. I think we're in a position to where this thing could be manageable. But that's just the in-house sauce. That's just the in-house sauce. And I ain't even getting some of my other ideas with Terry and Arnold potentially diving back there in situations. Nick Whiteside maybe going back there. He's a guy that I think is a tall, long, rangy guy who maybe could get an opportunity to play back there. That there's other things that we could potentially dabble with and experiment with back there at the safety position. I'm by no means panicking. But if we get into the draft and free agent world, three main guys, and there's more, but three main guys that are kind of sticking out early in the process for me, and one's going to be confusing, so I'm going to talk about him last. But these three guys right here, listen, you got none other than Kamari Ramsey out of USC. You got Ardarius Washington from the Baltimore Ravens. And then you got Harold Perkins. And I know Harold Perkins is a linebacker, but stay with me. Harold Perkins from LSU. These three guys are guys that stick out to me as guys you could potentially bring to this Detroit Lions roster to bolster this safety or this defense in a way to deal with offenses in a certain way. I'll say it like that because, guys, the if you look at the scope of the NFL, you're starting to see more of these hybrid guys, these guys who don't have true positions. If you look at Nick Emenwari, right? He's a guy. Is he a linebacker? Is he a safety? If you look at, we were a little bit ahead of our time. He couldn't stay healthy, but Ife Melifonwu, he was a guy. Is he a safety? Is he a linebacker? The dude's 6'3", 220 pounds. He's like a little bit small to be a linebacker, but a little bit bigger to be a corner or a safety. You know what I mean? So it's just kind of like these guys that are kind of tweeners that are starting to play on these new school defenses because it's so many different games that these offenses are playing with the RPOs and the reads and putting these guys in conflict and in space. You got to have these guys who are good football players in space, but can get physical in the run game, but cover tight ends and slot receivers. So I'm going with this, man. Starting with a guy like Harold Perkins. undersized linebacker. This dude's 6'1", 225 pounds. He started off as just an edge rusher. He started to expand his game to be able to drop back into coverage and to do some things in space. I think that Harold Perkins is a guy who could potentially be that Sam linebacker position that the Detroit Lions have been trying to just find a person that was perfect for season after season after season. Derek Barnes took a huge step forward, but I think a guy like Harold Perkins could be even more explosive, even more dynamic. He could fit that position to, or like a glove, as Brad Holmes says. But he's a boomer bust guy. He's one of those guys who could be like Isaiah Simmons. He could be a guy that's got all of these physical tools. He goes and he runs the Pajama Olympics. His vertical's crazy. You look at the film and he's got all of this athleticism, and then he's a bust, right? Or if you got him in the right scheme, this is a guy who could be blitzing downhill. You can let him play wild and free inside of your defense, and he could be causing some havoc. So Harold Perkins out of LSU is a guy that I'm taking a strong look at as a day 3 guy that you could sneak and go and get, because I think that he's going to slide because he doesn't have a true position. So you can't just say, hey, listen, I'm taking this guy and he's going to go be a linebacker for me. I'm taking this guy and he's going to go be, he definitely can't be a safety because he doesn't have the fluidity that you need. So it definitely is a boomer bust. I think that he will be a day 2 or day 3 pick, but hey, you can get him. If you can get him, hey, maybe early round 4, or trade into the 3rd round, group him with a couple other pieces, add speed and athleticism to your defense. I think you're starting to talk about the guys like the Houston Texans, because when I look at his game, he kind of reminds me of like those guys like Aziz Shahir from the Houston Texans. He's just playing downhill, freak athleticism, speed. So first guy on my list, man, later in the draft, you bring him in the building, is none other than Harold Perkins. Next draft pick that I want to talk about is another guy, probably a day 2 guy as it stands right now, depending on what he does at the Pajama Olympics. He could move up the board, and I wouldn't be surprised if he runs a crazy fast 40. Looking at his film, is Kamari Ramsey out of USC. This is a guy who I think fits the Detroit Lions perfectly because he's a versatile defensive back who can play the nickel or he can go play deep safety. He's got speed. He'll come up and tackle. Now he's missed some tackles. I'm not gonna lie to you. He's missed some tackles, but he's also flat backed a lot of people. And I think that some of the tackles that he misses is because he's coming downhill so explosive and recklessly. That's something you can clean up. It's hard to clean up a guy who doesn't have the willingness to be aggressive, but it's easier to clean up a guy who is overly aggressive. We got to get him to come to balance and be a little bit better of a sure tackler, which he's shown that he can do in bunches. So I'm not worried about his tackling. When you watch the film, this dude is aggressive. He's downhill. He's punching out footballs. He's getting his hands on footballs, causing interceptions, getting sacks, blitzing. This is a dude who you can move all over the board. You couple him with a guy like Brian Branch, now we're talking about guys that you can play in a nickel, you can play in the back half. They don't know who you're going to be rolling down into the box. I need you guys to look at the defense and stop thinking about people just being in one spot. If you have guys that are versatile and can do multiple things on that back end, you don't know who's rolling down into the box at the snap of the ball. You don't know who's going to be in deep coverage. You don't know who's going to be blitzing. You don't know who's going to be rushing off of the edge. The more guys that we get who are versatile, the better off this Detroit Lions defense is going to be. Kamari Ramsey is somebody that I'm taking a strong look at. The icing on the cake is this is a guy who can play man-to-man coverage. So you can blitz and you can leave this guy on a slot receiver. You can leave this guy on a tight end, and he can cover man-to-man. We know Aaron Glenn was doing that. We know Coach Shep adopted that. He wants to leave guys on an island and let them just go compete. Kamari Ramsey is the dude. So that's another guy. There's a few more safeties that I like. There's another one out of LSU. There's another one out of Toledo. There's safeties in this draft is what I'm trying to say. And we don't need to panic about the safety position. I think that we can definitely make some stuff shake. And I'm going to explain it even further with the last guy on my list for the day. The last guy on my list is probably a guy most people haven't heard of. Ardarius Washington from the Baltimore Ravens. This is a dude. This is a dude that reminds me of a Meek, smaller guy. He is a ball hog. He's aggressive. Another Swiss Army knife. He can play the nickel. He can play safety. This is a dude that can play on special teams. And this is a guy who went from undrafted to being a starter for the Baltimore Ravens defense. All right. Now, here's where the Brian Branch conversation comes in, right? This is the good Brian Branch news. This is a dude who had the same exact injury as Brian Branch. Fast forward 7 months, he's back on the field causing a strip sack, right? So his second game back, coming back after 7 months after a ruptured Achilles, he's causing a strip sack and playing meaningful time for the Baltimore Ravens. So you're telling me Brian Branch was injured on December 4th. Fast forward 7 months. You're telling me that potentially in July, Brian Branch could be ready. You're telling me he could be back on the field come September if all things go right. Like this, when I read this, I had to double check. I had to look and make sure. Listen, this is encouraging news for me. If you're telling me that Brian Branch could potentially be back, I wasn't thinking Brian Branch until Thanksgiving, if we're lucky. All right, so they do have a technique that I've talked about. It's called the speed bridge. It's a different way that they're repairing these Achilles. I gotta expect that he's got the best surgeons, the best of the best, and they're doing everything that they can to get him back safely. So listen, my new hope is 7 months. Brian Branch back on the field. Now, obviously, we're not going to do anything that's going to put him in jeopardy, but shoot, even if you're telling me 7 months is a possibility, and then shoot, if we made it 9, we're into September, we don't even got to rush him back. But shoot, if I got him by September, I'm still happy. So Brian Branch, that is phenomenal news to me. I'm excited because if we get him back and we potentially get some pieces, I think that this secondary can go from to maybe a strong point for these Detroit Lions if we get these guys some help. So Baltimore Ravens, back to Ardarius. Listen, this is a guy who he's one of those guys that'll be another one. Super cheap, super affordable. As I wrote down, 2.2 to 2.5 million to get this guy into the building, add him to the secondary. Versatile piece, can play all over the secondary from nickel to either safety positions. Even if you got into a jam, you could probably throw him and play him at a little bit of backside corner. This is a dude who's going to compete, punch out footballs, get interceptions. Absolute grit guy, give you everything that he has. 1 year prove it deal. I feel like his story is a Brad Holmes type of story, a guy coming off of an injury, ready to go, got the right mentality, got something to prove. Listen, Ardarius Washington, I would not be surprised if he was a Detroit Lion. If you look at the scope of this thing, you think about the Baltimore Ravens made a trade last year to get Elodie Gilman from the Chargers. And then when they brought him in, that allowed him to play deep safety, and then Kyle Hamilton to come into the box and leave Malachi Starks in the back. I think that Gilman is going to be a free agent. I think their priority is going to be to sign Gilman because he allows him to do what they need to do. They got some other guys that they need to sign. I think that Ardarius Washington is somebody who could slip through the cracks. If he does, I think the Detroit Lions would be a perfect fit for him. You get him, maybe you spend a little bit of money on a guy like a Meek. You got Rock Yassin, you got Avonte Maddox. You're not spending a ton of money, but you're bolstering the secondary. You start moving your pieces around and using this secondary like Brad Holmes described. We're not drafting guys to play single positions. We're drafting defensive backs to play all over the place. Don't mess around and let Ennis Rakestraw be healthy. Now we're talking about a secondary with depth, right? A secondary with depth. And it excites me, man. So when I start thinking about this safety position, we don't got to spend tons of dollars to make this thing solid, right? Whether or not Kirby Joseph is healthy or not. Now, do I want Kirby to be healthy? Absolutely. I think that he's the best safety in the league. But if we can't get him healthy, right, we will still have enough to be able to play doggone good football on that back end. Guys, let me know how you're feeling about the guys that I mentioned today because I'm excited. I'm over the moon for these guys. Leave it in the comments. Let me know some guys that I didn't talk about that you want to hear me talk about. And stay tuned because I'm going to talk about my number one guy that I want in free agency. Stay locked in. I'll be back with another one. Peace.